50 years ago, on the banks of the River Avon, a few minutes' walk from the Royal Shakespeare Company, a pioneering theatrical experiment took place, involving some of the most iconic names in British theatre. It's a very important part of the cultural history of our country, and yet it's been almost completely forgotten. My name's Abigail Rokerson Woodall. I'm an academic at the Shakespeare Institute. And a few years ago, I set about unearthing the strange, lost story of the Stratford Roundhouse. I discovered that the theatre was set up by a man called Martin Bax, a former actor now living in retirement. So I tracked Martin down, and I invited him back to Stratford to tell his fascinating story for the first time in 5 decades. Has this changed a great deal?
I remember this small town, and then suddenly there's a great big metropolis. All I remember is the bells ringing. The digs were right next to the church.
Oh, how lovely. Half a century ago, a young Martin had secured himself a very promising job playing small roles and understudying at the world-famous RSC. So this is the programme for The Two Gentlemen of Verona,
Yeah.
which you were in 1970. And there you are, servant Martin Bax, outlaw Martin Bax. So you were 28. This was your second ever job. Helen Mirren,
Yeah.
Ian Richardson,
Yes.
and Peter Egan, Patrick Stewart. Oh, it must have been very exciting as a young actor.
I was thrilled to bits. I wanted
Yeah.
to join what I thought was the greatest company in the world, really.
Yeah. While treading the boards here, Martin had a brainwave. He would set up a studio theatre, a kind of informal fringe theatre where anybody from the company could try out new experimental work and get valuable experience, acting, directing or writing.
I wanted anybody who was anything to do with the Royal Shakespeare Company to be involved, which is why later on I literally wrote, I think it was 200 and something letters to every single member from, well, I thought Peggy Ashcroft right down to the cleaners, and said, I want to create a new theatrical space at Stratford for anyone to use with any ideas.
Martin is a very persuasive chap, and he used all his charm to persuade the RSC to let him use a small building which they owned, 5 minutes' walk from the theatre. It's called the Roundhouse, and it had previously been operating as a tea room. So this is the Roundhouse. This is the building that they allowed you to have.
Yes,
and
it
to convert.
certainly is. The first thing I did was to get rid of all the stuff, the tea stuff. I don't know where I put all that. And then really construct a multi-layered stage.
The Roundhouse is in fact 2 structures, the circular section at the back and at the front, the impressive entrance. So this bit here, this rectangular building, what was this?
This is the foyer.
This is the
That's
foyer.
the side of the foyer.
Ah.
And I think you'll see in a minute that this is the front of the foyer,
gosh.
which is really quite grand.
Oh, it is. It looks a bit like a
Yes.
temple, doesn't it?
And that was the front door.
Gosh.
So that's where the audience would come
That's
in.
where the audience came in.
Yeah.
How lovely. Wonderful. Gosh. So, how does it feel coming back here after 52 years?
I'm just so emotional about it, really. It really was extraordinary time, really.
These posters are all of modern RSC productions. But half a century ago, Martin packed out this building with shows which included song and dance, poetry recitals, cinema showings, and perhaps most importantly, productions of new works.
I suppose I was fiercely idealistic. I was going to go into the theatre to change the world, you know.
Yes.
Tell important things to people, to the general public.
Martin has kept these photographs of a play written by actor John Cain called Plastic Birthday, with a young Helen Mirren in the lead. The play transferred to London and won an award for Best Midlands Play. it's about a young woman, isn't it, who gives birth and doesn't feel she can keep the baby and puts it in a plastic bag.
Oh, it was really,
Yeah, very
you know,
troubling.
but it dealt with a very difficult, controversial subject
Yes.
in a completely radical way. So it was a true play for the Roundhouse, for the
Yes.
space.
Yes. It feels to me kind of extraordinary that all this amazing work went on here. I feel like there should be a plaque or something to say, you know, this was where Helen Mirren and Ben Kingsley and Alan Howard and all these extraordinary actors did some really innovative and original work.
Yes, it is. It is sad that it's been completely neglected.
Fortunately for theatre historians like me, Martin has kept hold of an extensive archive. Ben Kingsley says he'd like to do some music or a music and poetry evening, which of course he was involved in. This was the set for the Lorca. Oh wow, and the lighting rig, brilliant. Okay, and this is Patrick Stewart's membership card.
Yes. I think he paid up. Yes, paid. Yes, on the back.
The Roundhouse seems to have been a great success, and Martin had big plans for the future. At the end of 1970, he went on tour to America with Peter Brook's celebrated production of A Midsummer Night's Dream. But then he got devastating news. The RSC told him they wouldn't renew his contract for the 1971 season, so he wouldn't be able to carry on at the Roundhouse.
It transpired really that was the end of my involvement with the Royal Shakespeare Company. Of course, I was distraught. I said, well, look, I've started this theatre and I've got all these plans for 1971. I'm afraid that the answer was no.
Right.
So, there we go.
Oh. Gosh. That must have been very, very tough, actually. It must have been very hard for you, having done all of this, to find that you couldn't continue with it.
And this is why, you know, I'm so thrilled that you have taken all this trouble to search me out. So thank you.
It's a great pleasure. Martin has always assumed that the Roundhouse closed down in 1970 when he left, but I've been doing some digging. And I found that's not what happened. I have some news for him. So I take him back along the towpath down to the river to this spot. It's the RSC's iconic experimental space for new plays and new ideas, called The Other Place. So I thought, Martin, it was worth coming back here because one of the things that I'd wanted to do after talking to you was to find out, you know, what happened to the Roundhouse after you left Stratford. And I contacted some people who were in the 1971 season, and Lisa Harrow told me that she and David Suchet did a 1 hour long Macbeth that she's pretty sure was in the Roundhouse.
That's brilliant.
I think they carried on doing productions at the Roundhouse for another 2 years after you left.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I'm
yes,
so pleased
yes.
about that.
So I think that what this all led to, ultimately, was this, the RSC's permanent second theatre, The Other Place, which has been a really important part of the RSC's history. The RSC built The Other Place in 1974, based on the same kind of ideas and principles that Martin had argued for so passionately. In its early years, The Other Place was run by Buzz Goodbody, a pioneering and brilliant young director. She swiftly revolutionised the staging of Shakespeare at Stratford with a string of radically different, intense and exciting productions. And of course, The Other Place, you know, still here, still the RSC's studio theatre, and a really important studio theatre in both the RSC's history, but the history of theatre more generally. And I really do think that your work with the Roundhouse played a part in the founding of The Other Place.
Thank you. It's really a direct link, really.
I think so.
You know, of course, Buzz Goodbody was so excellent and did such an excellent job, and ran seasons far better than I could, I'm sure. I'm very, very pleased.
Martin says he was devastated to leave Stratford, but he's gone on to live a happy and full life. He acted at the National Theatre in the company run by Sir Laurence Olivier, and then he set up and ran one of the best arts festivals in the country, the Frome Festival, for which he received an MBE. Martin credits his experience at the Roundhouse as the ideal training ground for his future life in the arts.